After the surgery to remove the tumor, I called my son. Can you pick me up from the hospital? And he cut me off. Call a taxi, I'm playing on the computer. His wife whispered, tell him to go to a motel. We're better off without him. Imagine their surprise when 2 days later, they read the article about me and called 89 times. Before we continue, please subscribe to the channel and let us know where you are listening in the comments. My hands trembled as I dialed Brandon's number. The surgery was over, the tumor removed, and all I wanted was to hear my son's voice. Room 412 felt hollow, despite the steady beeping of monitors and the afternoon sunlight streaming through Venetian blinds. Dad? Brandon's voice carried the familiar sound of clicking keyboards and distant explosions from his computer games. Brandon, son, the surgery went well. The doctor says I can go home tomorrow morning. Can you pick me up around 11? Silence stretched between us, more clicking, a frustrated grunt from his end. Dad, just call a taxi. I'm in an important raid right now. Can't break away from my guild. These guys are counting on me. My chest tightened. 35 years of fatherhood, and he couldn't spare 1 hour. Son, I'm asking for a ride home from the hospital. 1 ride? Look, I'll send you money for the taxi, okay? Emily's got her yoga class tomorrow anyway, so we can't. Then I heard her voice clear as day through the phone. Emily, whispering just loud enough to cut through everything else. Tell him to go to a motel. We're better off without the old man hanging around. The room spun. My IV line tugged as I gripped the phone tighter. What did you just say? My voice came out stronger than I felt. What? Dad, I didn't say anything. Look, I really need to focus here. My team is depending on... Not you, Brandon. Emily. I heard everything, Emily. Everything she just said. The game sound stopped. Dead silence. Dad, you must have misheard. Emily didn't say... She told you to send me to a motel, said you're better off without me. More silence. Then Emily's voice again, no longer whispering. Ralph, you're being dramatic. We just think you'd be more comfortable somewhere with room service while you recover. The lie hit me like a physical blow. 40 years of working 12-hour electrical shifts. Paying for Brandon's college. Co-signing their mortgage. Missing my own retirement dreams to help them build their life. More comfortable? I could barely speak. In a motel? Brandon cleared his throat. Dad, maybe Emily has a point. You know how cramped our place gets, and with Caleb's schedule? I hung up. The phone slipped from my hand onto the white hospital sheets. Outside, Chicago traffic hummed along Lakeshore Drive, and somewhere in this massive city, my son was probably already back to his game. My own son, who couldn't drive 20 minutes to bring his father home. The afternoon light shifted across the floor as I stared at the ceiling tiles. 43 years since Martha and I brought Brandon home from this very hospital. I remembered his tiny fingers wrapped around mine, the promise I made to always protect him. Now he was protecting himself from me. The next morning arrived gray and cold. I'd barely slept, my mind churning through decades of memories. At 11 sharp, I called the hospital discharge desk. Mr. Wilson, who's picking you up today? Nurse Susan wheeled a chair toward my bed, her kind eyes scanning the empty room. Taxi, family's busy. She paused, clipboard in hand. Are you sure? After surgery, most patients prefer... I'm sure. Susan helped me gather my belongings into a plastic hospital bag. Everything I owned fit inside. Reading glasses, wallet, phone charger, and the clothes I'd worn 3 days ago. Not much to show for 70 years. The taxi's here, Mr. Wilson. Mike, the driver, was a thick-set guy with calloused hands like mine. He loaded my bag without questions, but raised an eyebrow when I gave him the address. Starlight Motel on Route 41. You sure about that place? It's not exactly the best area. It suits me fine. I'm not picky anymore. We pulled into Chicago traffic. Mike glanced at me in the rearview mirror as we passed families loading patients into warm cars, heading to comfortable homes. Surgery go okay? Yeah, tumor removal. Clean margins, the doctor said. That's good news. Family celebrating. I watched the city blur past. Construction crews working on high-rises, people rushing to important places, everyone with somewhere to be. Something like that. 25 minutes later, we pulled up to the Starlight Motel. The neon sign flickered between vacancy and no, casting pink shadows across peeling paint. Mike turned around, studying my face. Look, mister, no offense, but this doesn't seem right. You just had surgery. Maybe there's someone I could call. This is perfect. What do I owe you? $38.50. I counted out two 20s from my wallet, money I'd saved for emergencies. Funny how your whole life can become an emergency overnight. Keep the change. Mike helped me to the office door. You take care of yourself, okay? The desk clerk barely looked up from his magazine. How many nights? I'm not sure yet. Let's start with 1 week. Cash or card? Cash. He slid a key across the counter. Room 23. Ice machine's broken, but the pop machine works. Room 23 faced the highway. The carpet was worn thin in patches, and the window overlooked 6 lanes of traffic heading north toward Wisconsin. I set my bag on the bed and opened the curtains wide. For the first time in 3 days, I was completely alone. I sat on the edge of the bed and looked around my new home. A small table by the window, a chair with cigarette burns on the armrest, a television bolted to the wall. Everything I needed, nothing I wanted. Through the window, I watched semis rumble past, carrying cargo to distant cities. People living their lives, pursuing their dreams, building their futures. I opened my wallet and found the photograph I'd carried for 8 years. Brandon's college graduation. His broad smile under that blue cap, my arm around his shoulders. I'd worked 3 jobs that semester to pay his tuition. Standing there in my cap and gown, I'd felt like the proudest father in Illinois. Hours passed. The afternoon light faded into evening, and I remained by the window, watching traffic flow like a river of strangers. Each set of headlights carried someone toward family, toward warmth, toward people who wanted them home. I pulled out my wallet again and spread the photographs across the small table. Brandon at 6, missing his front teeth. Brandon at 16, holding his first job paycheck from the grocery store. Brandon at 25, keys to his new house dangling from his fingers. That house. I'd co-signed the mortgage when his credit wasn't quite good enough. Put down $15,000 of my own savings for their down payment. Martha had been gone 3 years by then, and helping Brandon build his life felt like honoring her memory. Dad, we'll pay you back as soon as we're stable, he'd promised, standing in their empty living room. 10 years later, I was sitting in a highway motel, and they'd never mentioned that money again. I picked up the graduation photo again. Spring 2012. I'd missed a week of overtime pay to attend that ceremony, but seeing Brandon walk across that stage made every sacrifice worthwhile. He was going to be somebody, make something of himself, make his mother proud. The fluorescent light above the table flickered, casting unstable shadows across the photographs. I remembered working Christmas Eve that year, running emergency electrical repairs so a family could have power for their holiday morning. Double overtime pay that went straight into Brandon's tuition fund. I'd told myself it was temporary, a father's duty. Once he graduated, established his career, found his footing, things would balance out. But they never did. After Martha's funeral, Brandon visited less frequently. Phone calls became shorter. Holidays turned into rushed obligations where I felt like an intruder in their comfortable life. The grandchildren I'd dreamed of bouncing on my knee barely knew my name. When did I become such a burden to my own son? The words came out loud in the empty room, startling me. I'd been thinking them for years, but never spoke them aloud. My phone buzzed. A text from Brandon. Dad, sorry about yesterday. Stressful day. Hope you're feeling better. Nothing about picking me up. Nothing about where I was staying. Nothing about the 40 years I'd spent building his life while forgetting to build my own. I set the phone aside and reached for my old Dell laptop, purchased used 3 years ago, when I'd finally admitted the world was leaving me behind. The motel's Wi-Fi password was taped to the table, Starlight 123. The screen glowed to life, and I stared at the empty desktop. Somewhere in this machine was everything I needed to tell my story. Not just the story of a father's disappointment, but the story of a man who'd given everything and received nothing in return. For 40 years, I'd worked 12-hour days to give Brandon every opportunity. I'd sacrificed my own dreams, my own retirement, my own future. I'd watched other men my age travel with their wives, pursue hobbies, enjoy the fruits of their labor. Instead, I'd built someone else's life while mine withered away. The cursor blinked on a blank document. Microsoft Word, waiting for words that had been building inside me for decades. Stories of midnight shifts and missed meals, of choosing his needs over mine, of believing that love meant sacrifice without limits. Maybe it was time people knew the truth. Maybe it was time to stop protecting the son who wouldn't cross town to bring his father home from surgery. My hands hovered over the keyboard, 40 years of story waiting to pour out. The cursor blinked at me like a heartbeat. White page, black letters waiting to be born. I flexed my stiff fingers and began hunting for the right keys. Son's betrayal, how cancer revealed family truth. Delete, start again. A father's story, when surgery shows you who your family really is. Better. My hunt and peck typing filled the silence between trucks rumbling past on Route 41. 2 fingers, methodical as my 40 years of electrical work. Each letter deliberate. I started with the hospital room. The beeping monitors, the phone call, Emily's voice cutting through everything I thought I knew about my family. Word by word, I rebuilt that moment for strangers to see. For 35 years, I believed I was raising a man who would stand by his father. Yesterday, lying in a hospital bed after tumor removal surgery, I learned the truth. The laptop screen cast blue light across my weathered hands. Outside, the motel's neon sign flickered between vacancy and no. But I wasn't paying attention anymore. The words were pouring out like water through a broken dam. I wrote about the college tuition, specific numbers, $47,000 over 4 years. Working Christmas Eve for double overtime. Skipping meals to make those payments. The pride I felt watching him graduate. My back ached from hunching over the small table, but I couldn't stop. Every memory demanded its place on the page. The house down payment. $15,000 from my retirement savings, handed over without hesitation, because that's what fathers do. I co-signed his mortgage when his credit wasn't quite enough. Put down $15,000 of my own money for their future. They promised to pay me back when they were stable. That was 10 years ago. I paused to wipe my eyes. The fluorescent light above flickered, casting unsteady shadows across family photographs spread beside the laptop. Brandon's graduation picture smiled up at me, but it felt like looking at a stranger now. Martha's funeral came next. The way Brandon showed up late, left early. Barely spoke to mourners who'd driven hours to pay respects. I'd made excuses then, told myself grief affects everyone differently. My fingers cramped, but I pushed through. Hunt and peck. Hunt and peck. Each keystroke a small act of rebellion against 35 years of silence. When my wife died, my son treated her funeral like an inconvenience. I told myself he was grieving. Now I understand he was practicing. The phone call transcript came last. Word for word, exactly as I remembered it. Brandon's dismissal, Emily's whispered cruelty. My own shock as I realized what I'd heard. 3 o'clock became 4. 4 became 5. The coffee from the vending machine had long gone cold, but I kept typing. Truth has its own momentum once you stop fighting it. I found the photo on my phone, the selfie I'd taken in the hospital bed yesterday morning before everything fell apart. Pale but smiling, believing my son would come for me. The image uploaded slowly on the motel's weak Wi-Fi. This is me, 24 hours ago, before I learned that asking my son for a ride home from cancer surgery made me a burden. By 6 a.m., I had 4 pages. By 8, it was 6. The story of a father who gave everything and received nothing. Not melodrama, just mathematics. Numbers don't lie like people do. I read it through one final time as Chicago woke up outside my window. Traffic building, people heading to jobs, families starting another day together. My story sat complete on the screen, waiting for the world to judge whether love should have limits. The email composition window opened. American Stories seemed like the right place for this kind of truth. I attached the article, added the hospital photo, and wrote a simple cover letter. This is my story. I hope someone learns from my mistakes. My finger hovered over the send button. Once I clicked this, there would be no taking it back. 40 years of private pain would become public record. I clicked send. Morning light leaked through thin curtains as I woke with my neck twisted against the laptop keyboard. The screen had gone dark, but the words were still there, waiting. My story told and sent. Somewhere in the digital wilderness. I'd slept maybe 4 hours. The coffee machine in the lobby dispensed something resembling caffeine, and I carried it back to room 23 like a ritual. Outside, Chicago was already rushing toward another day of important business. My inbox showed 13 responses already, mostly automated rejections from major publications. Thank you for your submission, but this doesn't meet our current editorial needs. We receive hundreds of submissions daily and cannot respond personally. Form letters from people who probably never read past the subject line, but one email stood out. American Stories had sent more than a form rejection. Mr. Wilson, your story is genuine dynamite. This is exactly the kind of human interest piece that connects with readers. Can we schedule a call this morning to discuss publication? Jake Anderson, senior editor. His phone number included. I stared at the email for 20 minutes, drinking vending machine coffee and watching traffic build on Route 41. Someone wanted to publish my story. A real editor at a real website thought my 40 years of fatherhood deserved an audience. At 10:30, my phone rang. Mr. Wilson? Jake Anderson from American Stories. Your piece about your son? Honestly, it's a bombshell. This kind of authentic family drama resonates with millions of readers. His voice was younger than mine, energetic in a way I'd forgotten existed. I just told the truth, I said. Sometimes truth is the most powerful weapon we have. Look, I want to run this today if possible. Your story has viral potential written all over it. Viral. I didn't fully understand what that meant, but Jake explained it like electricity. Once the current starts flowing, it can light up an entire grid. We'll need to verify a few details, but nothing invasive. Hospital records, college enrollment dates, that sort of thing. Standard fact-checking procedure. I gave him Brandon's full name, graduation year, even the name of the hospital. If this story was going public, it might as well be bulletproof. The photo you included, perfect touch, really drives home the vulnerability factor. We'll run it exactly as you submitted, full resolution. By noon, Jake called back. Everything checks out, Mr. Wilson. Your story goes live at 6 p.m. Central Time. We're featuring it on the front page of our website. I have a feeling this is going to explode. The afternoon crawled by. I walked to the gas station across the highway and bought a sandwich, eating it while watching the construction crew rebuild the road median. Everything around me was being reconstructed, rebuilt, repaired. Maybe it was time for the same kind of work on my life. At exactly 6 o'clock, I refreshed the American Stories website. There it was. My story, with my hospital photo, under a headline I'd never seen before. Cancer surgery reveals son's true colors, a father's heartbreaking story. Below the article, a comment section was already filling up. This broke my heart. No parent should endure this kind of betrayal. I'm calling my dad right now. This story is a wake-up call. Ralph Wilson deserves so much better than this treatment. Strangers were reading my words. People I'd never meet were learning about Brandon's rejection, Emily's cruelty, my 40 years of sacrifice. The validation felt like oxygen after drowning. My phone buzzed with an email notification, then another. The comment count climbed from 3 to 15 to 37. People were sharing their own stories of family disappointment, elder neglect, children who forgot where they came from. I closed the laptop and walked to the window. The highway stretched north toward Wisconsin, south toward Springfield. Traffic flowed in both directions, carrying people toward destinations I'd never see. But tonight, for the first time in years, I wasn't invisible. By morning, something had changed. The story wasn't just mine anymore. I woke to 17 email notifications on my phone, comments from strangers across the country, sharing their own stories of family betrayal and elderly neglect. My article had tapped into something deeper than one father's disappointment. It had touched a nerve about how America treats its aging parents. Sarah Johnson from Denver wrote the longest response. An ICU nurse who'd lost her own father to cancer 2 years earlier. She understood the vulnerability of lying in a hospital bed, hoping for family support. Her email arrived at 6 a.m. with a proposal that left me staring at the screen. Mr. Wilson, your story moved me to tears. I've created a GoFundMe campaign to help you rebuild your life. No elderly parent should face cancer recovery alone in a motel room. I clicked the link she'd included. Help Ralph Wilson, cancer survivor abandoned by family. The page showed my hospital photo, alongside Sarah's heartfelt description of my situation. Goal, $25,000. Current total, $3,147. 42 people had donated money to a stranger they'd never met. Teachers, nurses, retirees, even college students contributing $5 or $10 with messages of support. You deserve better. Family should mean something. This donation is in honor of my own father. My hands shook as I scrolled through the donor list. Margaret Phillips, $100. For all the sacrifices parents make. David Chen, $50. Cancer survivors need support, not abandonment. Anonymous donor, $500. Thank you for sharing your story. The laptop screen blurred as tears made reading impossible. I'd spent 40 years believing love was a one-way transaction. Parents give, children receive. These strangers were proving me wrong. By noon, the total had climbed to $8,200. Jake Anderson called with updates about the story's reach. Twitter users are sharing it like wildfire. Facebook groups for seniors and cancer survivors are lighting up with responses. Local news outlets are reaching out for interviews. I didn't understand half of what he explained about social media platforms and viral content, but I grasped the essential truth. Thousands of people were reading my story, relating to my pain, offering support I'd never expected. The afternoon brought more surprises. A lawyer from Springfield offered free legal advice about recovering the house, down payment I'd given Brandon. A retirement community in Wisconsin sent information about affordable housing options. 3 different churches, despite my lack of religious affiliation, offered financial assistance and emotional support. Mr. Wilson? The voice belonged to a reporter from WGN Chicago. We'd like to feature your story on tonight's news broadcast. Would you be available for a brief phone interview? Local television. My private humiliation was becoming public validation, and I wasn't sure which felt more surreal. By evening, Sarah's GoFundMe campaign had reached $15,600. The comment section on my original article had grown to over 400 responses, creating a digital support group for adults dealing with ungrateful children and family betrayal. My son hasn't called in 6 months, but reading your story gave me permission to stop making excuses for him. I'm sharing this with everyone I know. Parents need to understand they're not alone in this struggle. Ralph Wilson, you're a hero for speaking up. So many of us suffer in silence. I sat in the Starlight Motel lobby, using their stronger Wi-Fi to read every comment, every donation message, every shared story of family disappointment turned into community support. The desk clerk, a kid barely older than my grandson, kept glancing over with curiosity. You famous or something? Something like that? The evening news interview lasted 12 minutes. Simple questions about my story, my current situation, my feelings about the overwhelming response. I spoke plainly, the same way I'd approach an electrical repair job, honestly, methodically, without unnecessary drama. Sometimes, I told the reporter, speaking the truth isn't about revenge. It's about refusing to pretend that abuse is love. By 10 p.m., the GoFundMe total had reached $20,000. People from 43 states had contributed, along with donors from Canada and the United Kingdom. My story of Chicago family betrayal had become an international conversation about dignity, respect, and what we owe our aging parents. I fell asleep to the sound of email notifications chiming on my phone, each one representing another person who decided that Ralph Wilson, a 70-year-old retired electrician, deserved better than a highway motel room and a son's rejection. For the first time in decades, I wasn't alone. The buzzing woke me. 7 a.m., and my phone was dancing across the nightstand like an angry wasp. 7 missed calls, all from Brandon. I let it ring again while I made coffee from the vending machine downstairs. The machine's mechanical grinding provided a soundtrack to my morning routine, drowning out the electronic chirping from room 23. By the time I returned with my paper cup, 3 more calls had come through. I checked the messages while sitting on the bed, watching Route 41 carry the early commuters toward their important destinations. Dad, please call back. We need to talk. Delete. Dad, I'm sorry. We misunderstood the situation. Delete. The third message came from Emily. Her voice carried that honey-sweet tone she used when she wanted something. Come home. We're worried about you. Delete. I understood perfectly what had happened. Someone in their social circle had seen my story. A neighbor, a friend, maybe someone from Brandon's online gaming community. The internet had delivered my truth directly to their comfortable suburban doorstep. 10:30 brought another round. Brandon again, his voice tighter now. Why aren't you answering? That article isn't about us, right? The question made me smile. Of course it was about them. Every word, every sacrifice, every broken promise I'd documented. But Brandon still hoped he could control the narrative, pretend the father he'd abandoned was someone else's shame. By noon, Emily had switched tactics. Her message arrived between bites of my gas station sandwich, and I could hear Caleb playing in the background. Caleb misses his grandpa. We all love you. Using a 6-year-old as ammunition. The manipulation was so transparent it almost impressed me. Almost. The afternoon brought desperation. 23 calls throughout the day, each one more frantic than the last. I watched my phone screen light up every 20 minutes, displaying Brandon's name like a blinking neon sign, advertising his panic. Dad, I know you're getting these. Please respond. But I wasn't responding. For the first time in 35 years, I held the power in our relationship. They needed something from me: forgiveness, silence, the chance to rebuild their public image, and I was under no obligation to provide any of it. Evening brought Emily's final attempt. Her voice cracked slightly, the polished manipulation giving way to genuine fear. Please, let's fix this. The neighbors are asking questions. There it was. The truth behind all their sudden concern. Not worry for my well-being, not guilt over their treatment, but embarrassment. Their carefully constructed suburban image was cracking, and they needed me to help patch the foundation. I set the phone on the table and opened my laptop. The GoFundMe campaign had reached $47,000. Strangers from every state had contributed to my independence, while my own family called only when their reputation was threatened. 9:15 brought Brandon's last message of the day. Dad, I know you're getting these. Please respond. I picked up the phone, held it for a moment, then powered it off completely. The screen went dark, and for the first time since surgery, silence filled. Room 23. No buzzing, no ringing, no desperate voices demanding my attention on their terms. I lay back on the thin motel mattress, listening to the steady rhythm of highway traffic. Tomorrow would bring new possibilities, new choices made from strength instead of desperation. Tonight, I slept in perfect, powerful quiet. I woke to the most beautiful sound in the world. Nothing. No buzzing phone, no desperate messages, no family crisis demanding my immediate attention. Just the quiet hum of the motel's air conditioning and the distant whisper of morning traffic heading north toward Wisconsin. Coffee tasted better without interruption. I settled at the small table with my laptop, curious about what the night had brought. The GoFundMe total made me blink twice, $50,147. People from Australia and Canada had donated while I slept. Messages in Spanish, French, even what looks like Italian. Your story reached me in Rome. Come visit Italy. You deserve beautiful experiences. Italy. I'd never considered traveling abroad. 40 years of electrical work had kept me tied to Chicago, to overtime shifts, to building someone else's dreams. But $50,000 could buy a different kind of life. My phone remained powered off, sitting silent on the nightstand like a disarmed bomb. Peace stretched through the morning hours, broken only by a call to the motel's landline around noon. Mr. Wilson, this is Lindsay Thompson from the Chicago Tribune. I've been following your story, and I'd love to discuss a feature article about your situation. Lindsay's voice carried the crisp professionalism of someone who understood the difference between sensation and substance. She'd covered elder care issues before, she explained, and recognized the broader implications of my experience. Are you planning any follow-up to your original story? I'm planning a whole new life, actually. The words surprised me even as I spoke them. But they felt true. More than true, they felt inevitable. I think there's more story to tell, I continued, warming to the possibility. Lindsay scheduled a phone interview for next week, after I'd had time to process the overwhelming response. Professional courtesy from someone who understood that viral fame could be as disorienting as family betrayal. I spent the afternoon reading donor messages, each one a small validation of choices I'd begun to doubt. Teachers who recognized the sacrifice of working multiple jobs. Adult children who'd called their own parents after reading my story. Retirees who'd experienced similar family disappointments, but never found the courage to speak publicly. This money isn't charity, wrote Margaret Phillips from Portland. It's payment for showing us the truth about family loyalty. Use it to live your dreams, not theirs. Your dreams. The phrase stuck with me as I walked outside for the first time in days. Route 41 stretched in both directions, carrying travelers toward destinations I'd never considered. North to Milwaukee, south to Springfield, and from there to anywhere in the world. $50,000 represented more money than I'd ever controlled personally. Not money borrowed for someone else's mortgage or saved for someone else's education, but money given specifically for my happiness, my choices, my future. I opened a new browser tab and searched retirement in Italy. The results showed villa rentals, language classes, photography workshops in Tuscany. A different kind of life entirely, one measured in personal fulfillment rather than family obligation. The cursor blinked in a fresh document window. My first story had been about betrayal, about 40 years of giving without receiving. But this story would be different. This story would be about freedom. Father's Revenge, How I Started New Life Without Betrayers. The title felt perfect. Not bitter, not cruel, just honest about what happened when a man finally chose himself over people who saw him as a burden. I typed steadily, no longer hunting and pecking, but finding a rhythm that matched my growing confidence. The words came easier now, shaped by 3 days of unexpected support and the clarity that comes from making hard decisions. At 70, I'm finally living for myself, not for people who see me as a burden. The sentence captured everything I wanted to say. 40 years of overtime shifts, missed vacations, and deferred dreams had ended with a phone call that revealed my true value to the people I'd sacrificed everything to support. I wrote about the Italy trip I was planning, specific details, Rome in May, photography classes in Tuscany, maybe renting a small apartment in Florence for a month. The GoFundMe money would fund adventures I'd never allowed myself to imagine. I'll use this money for travel, new hobbies, anything I want, but not for them. Each paragraph built on the previous one, creating a narrative of transformation rather than revenge. The strangers who donated to my independence had shown me something my own family never had: unconditional support. Your generosity taught me that family isn't about blood. It's about people who value your presence instead of resenting your existence. I included specific thank yous to donors who'd shared their own stories. Sarah Johnson, whose campaign had started everything. Margaret Phillips, whose payments comment had shifted my perspective. The anonymous donor from Rome, who'd suggested Italy in the first place. By 6 o'clock, I had 5 pages of forward-looking optimism, not dwelling on past disappointments, but celebrating present possibilities. The story of a man who discovered self-worth at an age when most people accept their limitations. Jake Anderson's response came within 20 minutes of submission. Mr. Wilson, you've created a phenomenon. This follow-up piece is exactly what readers are craving. You're not just telling a story anymore. You're leading a movement. A movement. The idea seemed impossible, but Jake explained the broader impact. Adult children calling elderly parents. Families having honest conversations about expectations and boundaries. Support groups forming around the simple idea that love shouldn't require complete self-sacrifice. We're featuring this on the homepage immediately. I predict even bigger response than your first piece. The article went live at 8 p.m. Comments appeared within minutes, each one validating choices I'd second-guessed for days. Ralph Wilson is living proof that it's never too late to choose dignity over obligation. Booking my own Italy trip inspired by this story. Sometimes we need permission to live for ourselves. My father read this and finally told my brother to move out. 40-year-old kids need boundaries too. The sharing numbers climb faster than I could refresh the page. Twitter, Facebook, platforms I didn't fully understand but could measure by their enthusiasm. Thousands of people forwarding my story to friends, family members, anyone who needed to hear that self-respect isn't selfish. I closed the laptop and looked around room 23. 3 days ago, this motel had represented the loneliest moment of my life. Tonight, it felt like the launching pad for everything I'd never allowed myself to want. Tomorrow, I'd call a travel agent. Maybe visit the passport office downtown. Start turning possibility into itinerary, dreams into concrete plans. For the first time in decades, my future belonged entirely to me. Italy was calling, and Ralph Wilson was finally ready to answer. 3 days of packing had reduced my life to 1 suitcase and a carry-on bag. Everything that mattered fit inside: passport, plane tickets, camera, the leather jacket Martha had given me for our 20th anniversary. Everything else was just weight I no longer needed to carry. The knock came at 2:30, sharp, insistent, familiar. "Dad, we know you're in there." Brandon's voice carried the same entitlement that had echoed through 35 years of our relationship. The assumption that his presence demanded my attention, regardless of my preferences or circumstances. I opened the door. They looked terrible. Brandon's usual careful appearance had deteriorated into wrinkled clothes and unshaven desperation. Emily's makeup couldn't hide the dark circles under her eyes, or the tight lines around her mouth. "We need to talk," Emily said, pushing past me into the room before I could respond. "We made a mistake," Brandon began, launching into what sounded like a rehearsed speech. "Let's forget everything and start over. Come home with us right now." I closed the door and leaned against it, watching them take in the motel room's transformation, suitcase packed and ready. Italy guidebook open on the table, plain confirmation visible on my phone screen. "Where did you find me?" I asked. "The motel clerk posted about your story on Facebook," Emily admitted. "Someone recognized the description and tagged us." Of course. Even my attempt at invisibility had become part of their public embarrassment. "We understand we did wrong," Emily continued, shifting into her practice manipulation mode. "Give us a chance to make it right. Family forgives each other." "Family doesn't abandon family in hospitals," I replied, my voice steady and calm. "You taught me that lesson quite clearly." Brandon stepped forward, desperation replacing his earlier confidence. "Dad, please, we can fix this. The articles, the publicity, none of it matters. We just want you to come home." "Call a taxi," I said. "I'm flying to Italy tomorrow morning. I'm better off without you." The words hung in the air like smoke from a extinguished fire. Emily's face flushed red, then pale. Brandon's mouth opened and closed without sound. "What about Caleb?" Emily tried one last manipulation. "He asks about Grandpa every day. He loves you." "Caleb will understand when he's older why Grandpa chose dignity over duty." I picked up my plane ticket and showed them the confirmation. "Rome, tomorrow at 11 a.m., one way." Brandon reached for my arm, but I stepped back. "Dad, you can't just disappear. We're family. Families work through problems together. You had 40 years to work through problems with me. Instead, you worked through my bank account and my willingness to sacrifice my own dreams for yours." Emily's voice cracked slightly. "We'll pay you back. Every penny of the house down payment, the college tuition, everything." "With what money?" I asked. "Your freelance income? Your part-time copywriting? You couldn't afford to pay me back 10 years ago, and your financial situation hasn't improved." The truth settled over them like cold water. They'd built their comfortable life on my sacrifices, and now those sacrifices were being publicly examined by thousands of strangers who'd concluded that Brandon and Emily Wilson were ungrateful children. "The neighbors won't talk to us," Brandon whispered. "Our friends have stopped calling. Emily's clients are asking questions." "Good," I said. "Maybe they'll treat their own parents better." I returned to my packing, folding the last few items while they stood in stunned silence. The Italy guidebook lay open to a page about Florence. Photography workshops, art classes, a life built around discovery instead of obligation. "This isn't you, Dad," Emily said desperately. "This angry, vindictive person isn't who you are." I stopped packing and looked at her directly. "You're right. The man who worked 12-hour shifts to pay for your husband's education, while you both treated him like a burden. That wasn't who I was meant to be either." Brandon tried once more. "If you leave, that's it. No contact, no relationship, no grandfather for Caleb." "Perfect," I said. "Exactly what I'm hoping for." I closed the suitcase and set it by the door. My flight confirmation lay on the table next to $47,000 in GoFundMe donations from people who'd never met me but valued my dignity more than my own family did. They left without another word. The flight to Rome felt like flying toward freedom itself. 9 hours above the Atlantic gave me time to process the finality of what I'd done. No anger, no regret, just the quiet satisfaction of a man who'd finally chosen himself over people who saw him as an inconvenience. Rome welcomed me with May sunshine and the overwhelming scent of espresso and ancient stone. My hotel near the Spanish Steps buzzed with tourists from every continent, but I felt like the only person who'd ever truly arrived somewhere he belonged. Day 3 brought an unexpected encounter at the Colosseum. A A British couple, Margaret and James, recognized me from the articles that had apparently spread beyond American social media. "You're that gentleman from Chicago," Margaret exclaimed, "the one who stood up to his ungrateful family. James and I have been following your story. Absolutely inspiring." Their enthusiasm surprised me. I'd expected judgment, maybe pity, but Margaret and James treated my rebellion like a triumph worth celebrating. "We're retired teachers," James explained as we toured the ancient amphitheater together. 40 years of putting everyone else's needs first. Your articles gave us permission to start living for ourselves. Venice arrived a week later with photography opportunities I'd never imagined possible. The sunset over the Grand Canal on my 5th evening, there looked like something painted by masters whose work I'd only seen in books. I captured it with my phone, but the image felt incomplete, lacking the depth I could see with my own eyes. "You need proper camera, signore," suggested the hotel concierge. "Venice, she is meant for beautiful pictures." In Tuscany, I joined a wine tasting tour that included travelers from 6 different countries. When they learned my story, the conversation shifted from small talk to profound discussions about family expectations, personal autonomy, and the courage required to disappoint people who've never appreciated your sacrifices. "My daughter expects me to babysit her children every weekend," shared Anna, a retired nurse from Germany. "Your articles made me realize I can say no without feeling guilty." By Florence, I'd purchased a Canon camera that felt substantial and important in my hands. The elderly shop owner, Giuseppe, spent 2 hours teaching me basic techniques. "Photography, she is about seeing truth," he explained in careful English. "You already know how to see truth. Now you learn to capture it." My hotel room transformed into a makeshift studio. Italy guidebooks shared space with camera manuals. Photo editing software replaced solitaire games on my laptop. For the first time since retirement, I woke each morning excited about the day's possibilities. The video call from Lindsay Thompson, the Chicago journalist, found me in my Florence hotel room, uploading photos to a blog I'd started to document my journey. "Mr. Wilson, how has Italy changed your perspective on your situation?" "Italy didn't change my perspective," I replied, adjusting the camera angle so she could see the Arno River behind me. "Italy just gave me space to discover who I was when I wasn't busy being someone else's disappointment." The blog had attracted followers I never expected. Retirees from across America shared their own stories of family ingratitude. Adult children apologized to elderly parents they'd taken for granted. Travel companies offered sponsored trips in exchange for photography content. "Today I discovered I have an eye for beauty I never knew existed," I wrote in my evening post. "At 70, I'm learning that the best chapters of life might be the ones you write for yourself." 3 weeks in, my blog statistics showed 23,000 regular readers. Comments arrived from every continent. Photography workshops in Greece had reached out about collaboration opportunities. Florence became my base for planning the next adventure. Greece called with promises of ancient architecture and Mediterranean light that would challenge my growing photographic skills. Standing on the Ponte Vecchio at sunset, capturing the perfect reflection of golden light on the Arno's surface, I realized I'd become someone I'd never met before. Ralph Wilson, artist. Ralph Wilson, adventurer. Ralph Wilson, man who lived for his own joy instead of other people's convenience. The camera clicked, preserving the moment when I understood that the best revenge against people who don't value you is living so well without them that their absence becomes a gift. Café Gilly had become my morning sanctuary, corner table, perfect light for reading, and Lucia, who brought my espresso without being asked. Florence had taught me the art of unhurried mornings, something 40 years of electrical work had never allowed. "Buongiorno, Signor Ralph," Lucia smiled, setting down the small cup. "Your usual cornetto today?" "Grazie, Lucia. You read my mind." 2 months in Italy had given me enough vocabulary to navigate daily pleasures, and enough confidence to attempt conversations that would have terrified me in Chicago. Fear, I discovered, was just another habit I could break. My laptop opened to a blog post I'd been crafting for 3 days, the final Italy entry before Greece, a reflection on what I'd learned about freedom, family, and the courage to disappoint people who've never appreciated your presence. Freedom means living for yourself, not for people who don't value you. The title felt honest without being bitter. 52,000 blog followers deserve truth, not anger. My story had apparently inspired dozens of elderly people to travel solo, hundreds to establish boundaries with ungrateful children, and thousands to pursue creative interests they had deferred for decades. I scrolled through the camera roll on my phone, reviewing 10 weeks of discoveries. The Colosseum at sunrise, Venice gondoliers navigating morning mist, Tuscan vineyards heavy with promise, Florence architecture that had stood for centuries, outlasting countless family dramas and personal disappointments. At 70, I learned that respect starts with respecting yourself, I typed. For 40 years, I confused love with sacrifice, family with obligation, loyalty with self-erasure. Italy taught me the difference. Lucia returned with the cornetto, warm and perfect. You look different than when you arrived, Signor Ralph. Happy, no? Lucia, I finally discovered who I was meant to be. She nodded approvingly. Italian wisdom understood the importance of personal happiness in ways American duty never had. The blog post continued with practical advice drawn from experience. How to establish boundaries without guilt. Why saying no to family demands isn't selfish. When love requires distance for dignity to survive. Greece calls next, I wrote. At 70, the world is just beginning to open. My phone buzzed with an email from Turner Publishing in New York. The subject line made me pause. Photography book proposal, Ralph Wilson's Italian journey. They'd discovered my blog through social media shares and wanted to discuss publishing a coffee table book of my photography, combined with essays about reinvention after 70. Advance payment, $25,000. Professional validation for skills I'd developed in 10 weeks. The electrician who'd spent decades building other people's dreams was being offered money to share his own creative vision. I finished the blog post with a photograph I'd taken yesterday at sunset from the Ponte Vecchio. Golden light reflecting on the Arno River, tourists and locals sharing the same bridge, everyone heading somewhere important to them. Family isn't blood, I concluded. Family is who celebrates your joy instead of resenting your independence. The post uploaded to an audience that had grown from my original story of hospital betrayal to this celebration of self-discovery. Comments appeared within minutes from readers in dozens of countries, sharing their own stories of late-life courage and family boundary setting. Greece travel confirmations lay printed beside my coffee cup. Athens, Santorini, Crete. Photography workshops with international students half my age who'd follow my blog and requested mentorship from someone who'd learned to see beauty without permission from people who couldn't appreciate it. I closed the laptop and gathered my camera bag. Piazza Santa Croce was coming alive with morning activity. Vendors setting up, tourists consulting maps, locals beginning another day in the city they'd chosen to call home. Walking across the ancient stones, I thought about the motel room in Chicago where this journey had begun. Room 23 at the Starlight, where I'd learned that the worst thing that could happen to a man wasn't his family's rejection. It was accepting that rejection as deserved. The best chapters I'd discovered are the ones you write for yourself. If you like this story, please like this video, subscribe to the channel, and share your impressions of this story in the comments. To listen to the next story, click on the box on the left. Thank you for watching.